Welcome to the Culture Stew podcast. I'm Maria Morukian.
And I'm Roger Moreano.
In every episode, we will meet with practitioners, authors, and all around fascinating people who share their wisdom and insights on all things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hey, Roger.
What's up, Maria? Can I just tell you, it's springtime, of course. Spring is in the air. As you could see, it's gotten quite green behind me in my yard and neighbors' yards. And what a perfect timing for our wonderful guest, my dear friend, Veronica Moore, who has really given me a deep level of appreciation for the idea of plant therapy, which I didn't really know what it was in the beginning, but this idea of how engaging in just the tending of and caring of plants and gardens and being in nature can really center us and slow our lives down a little bit, and then really, remind us that our well-being and our self-care is truly important. So I just was so thrilled that we had a chance to talk to Veronica and all the good work that she's doing.
Me too. I loved how she was able to thread through her storytelling in our conversation, the love and passion for gardening and plant cultivation, but also how that intersects with community building, with advocacy, with social disruption. I think one of the things that we talked about that was very prevalent in our conversation was just how all of us who are trying to enact social change can find ourselves feeling so overwhelmed and burnt out, and we're not centering our mental or
Right.
physical or emotional well-being, and just this simple practice of being in nature and finding community in that, right? It's not just the individual act, but also being able to bring people together was something that was really powerful.
Yeah, and what I love especially is, I met Veronica during my time in higher education, and she is an alumni of the institution that I worked at. And, the story of her own, growth and growing up in the world and kind of figuring out her place and not being sure of what was out there, what existed, not being sure if she even belonged. And to go through
Yeah.
that and to find those professionals that were there willing to support, but also just her people, as she stated in our interview, right? That she really was able to, in those interactions, discover who she was, what she's capable of, and to be willing to take risks in order to find out what she was capable of that she never even knew existed, because those, the willingness to take those risks revealed that to her. So I think that
Yeah.
story is also very powerful for any of us who struggle with trying to find out what's next or where we're going or what we're capable of. And she's doing a lot, quite a
Yeah.
bit, and juggling quite a bit and doing quite well.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, our listeners will definitely hear this in the conversation. But she talked about some of the messages that she received early in life. And, one of the prominent ones for her was being a risk taker. And it's interesting when we think about just everything this woman does. I mean, she's a consultant, she is an author, she's a restaurateur, she's got another book coming along soon. So definitely somebody who is willing to not only take risks, but to listen to that inner voice that says this is your calling. And every single time she does, it's led to incredible outcomes. So I hope our listeners enjoy our conversation with Veronica H. Moore. Welcome, Veronica Moore. Thank you so much for joining us on the Culture Stew podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here as the guest.
So share a little bit of your backstory with us. And particularly, we love to find out from our guests, what were some of the messages that you received early in your life that have had a profound impact on how you see yourself, how you show up in the world, the life choices that you've made?
Sure. I think that as a young child, my mother would tell you that I was very outgoing and I loved to take risks. And so that kind of laid the foundation, I think, for me to express myself as an adult. But it took me a while to get back to that place, right, of taking risks, because, in life we encounter different things, different experiences, different people. And sometimes that very outgoing, personality and really wanting to try new things get dulled, right? And they get dampened by people around you. They get dampened by society and telling you what you can and cannot do. And so I would like to say that I had probably a prime opportunity to take risks. Maybe I would say toddlerhood until I got into elementary school. But I've always had a love for learning. And I think that taking risks with a love for learning go hand in hand. I've always been that young girl who was very eager to go to class and go to school and would cry when I couldn't go to school because I got the chicken pox, right? And so my siblings would make fun of me about that, calling me different names and things of that nature. But I always had a burning desire to learn. So in every situation, whether it be school, whether it be life, but definitely within those primary education years, um, and middle school and high school, I had a yearning to learn more because I was very aware of what it is that I did have and what I did not have based upon where I grew up. Right, so I grew up in the South, on the South side of Chicago, West side of Chicago, sorry. And we grew up in what some would consider the ghetto, right? We grew up in very impoverished neighborhoods, but I didn't realize what that was until people made me aware of that. As a young child, I was going to my grandmother's house. I was engaging with my cousins and my family members, and we had wonderful times because that is what I knew. Family and a love for family was what it was that I knew. And that was something that was very important to me and something that was instilled in me at a very young age. But once I got into grade school, right, and some of the childhood bullying started to happen, I started to see the stark differences in what other people had in their families and what we did not have in our family. And that, continued on into high school as well. My mother making sure that I had the necessities of what it is that I needed as a student, as a track and field athlete, and just as a young girl, and the bare necessities of what it is that she could provide. And I saw that as very honorable, right? It wasn't until I got to college and saw a very, very, very non-diverse environment around me. I was the only Black student in many different occasions on that college campus, within the classrooms, within my residence hall. Funnily enough, not within the sports and athletic situation and environment. There were plenty of us who were there. And to be quite honest, it was our access into the sphere of higher education, right? We used our talents to be able to gain access to what normally, if it were just based upon what it is that we had in our social economic status, we would not be in that space. So we use our talents to get what it is that we needed in order to progress, right, and to move forward. But in those spaces, that was when I really truly realized that my desire to learn, my desire to know myself better, and my desire to be seen was not enough. There was something that I needed to do in order to get to the next opportunities that would come my way. And that meant using my voice, right? Finding my own advocacy for myself, but also for my peers around me. And in that beautiful space, right, of being the only in many different situations, I was very aware and I was very cognizant of the have and the have-nots. That environment made it crystal clear to me. Now, I did see that, as I explained before, in elementary school and in high school, but in the college environment, you had other resources to add to that have and have-nots environment. And for me, I had two choices. I could fight through that, or I could flight, right? And so I knew that my mother made so many sacrifices for me to be in that space. Yes, I had the talent, but she put up money, right? She made sure that I had what it is that I needed in that space. And so it was important for me to definitely fight back. I would say within that environment, I found my voice. My identity became crystal clear and more aware to me than any other time before. I was like, you're Black and you're a woman and you're a Black woman. And there are inequities that come with that. There are prejudices that come with that. And there's unfair treatment that comes with that. So you can imagine a very immature 18-year-old girl coming into a situation like that, not really knowing how to navigate through those situations. It's like, what do you do? How do you survive? right? And so it became very crucial to find the resources, to find the people, to find my voice, and to go into those deep, dark places, right? Where sometimes I didn't know what my next step was going to be. I didn't know how to formally and appropriately, in some instances, express the anger or the frustration beyond the yelling, right? Or beyond the assertive. I won't dare say aggressive because it is assertive, and it's a high assertion that I needed to exude to get my point across, to get to the next access point. And I think for me, it was very powerful and helpful to be in that space at that age, because prior to that, being bullied throughout childhood was a silencer for me, right? It silenced my voice. It did not allow for me to speak up for myself. But once I found that opportunity to do that, and more so for other people, I have found that characteristic has really transformed my life and transitioned from college to adulthood to motherhood to my professional career. That point of advocacy is really important to me. So that was a long answer, but it kind of quickly gathered my foundation of, who I came to be and know who I am as, the person that you're talking to and having a conversation with now.
Veronica, so much of your story and everything that you're doing now makes so much more sense hearing that backstory, because I think, when I look at what you're engaged in now, which is, you've in recent years, you've been a representative of a major, national fraternal organization, a collegiate fraternal organization. You've had higher ed experience. You have opened up a restaurant, the Taste Smokers, with your partner, and you have now become an author, a children's book author. It seems like all of those characteristics that you described in terms of being willing to take risks, not listening to what society is telling you should do, but what you really want to do, jumping into the unknown and embracing ambiguity and trusting yourself to just dive into something. I'm assuming you didn't have extensive restaurant owning experience before you dove in there, right?
No,
Or
I just
being
like
an
to eat.
author. What's that?
I just like to eat.
Yeah, there you go. I'm with you. That's why I love you. And so yeah, so all of those things just, it makes so much more sense. And can you share a little bit about how these characteristics and these life experiences helped shape the paths that you've chosen professionally, and where you're heading in your life?
That's a very interesting question. And I think part of the answer would be flipped. My professional experiences prepared me for all of those other things, right? And so being able to experience what I did at my alma mater gave me the knowledge that there was this world outside of that space that allowed for professionals to advocate on behalf of undergraduate students. And I found that absolutely fascinating. I was very fortunate enough to have some amazing professionals at my alma mater who invested in me. And I knew that that was something that saved me. It saved my life. It saved my college experience. And I knew that even joining my sorority at the time gave me access to be able to do great work for humankind. When I found out that there was this world of professionals who were still on the college campus and really providing an opportunity for growth for students, I was like, whoa, sign me up for that, right? I want to go and be a part of that experience. I want to give back to students the way that professionals gave to me. I did not know that that will require me to go back to graduate school, because I was totally over school at that point in time. I was like, absolutely not. But even then, I took a risk to say, I am going into very uncharted territory. I have no idea what this is. I didn't know I was applying to go to graduate school as well. I thought that I was applying for a job. So here's this girl who's just like, hey, why not? Let's go ahead and do it. And my professors was like, this is like the ideal social experiment. Like, we are going to see whether or not she is able to thrive in this space. So I found that ability to give back to students in the way of going back and getting my degree in higher education. Within the higher ed space, there is a very strong, and I will say foundational practice of advocacy at its core. That is what the mission of higher education, in my own kind of definition, is meant to do and be. It's to be a space of advocacy for the students, but also to provide them with the voice and the experience to be able to know how to advocate on behalf of themselves and society in general. So I was really engulfed and embraced within that culture of higher education. I had amazing professional experiences that prepared me for that voice. I had a very supportive supervisor at my first job. Big shout out to Tim Wilkinson, who allowed me to explore and dare and do and be involved in so many things because I was really trying to find my footprint, right, on how it was that I was going to be able to serve. I've always had this idea, this philosophy of servant leadership. So that's how I approach every single encounter that I was able to experience or opportunity that was given to me. I always have a heart to serve. And so that's an underlying kind of theme within my trajectory as well. But being in that space allowed for me to do that. It allowed for me to gain the experiences that I have. And then being in the fraternal space of needing to always advocate, right, for the students because the behavioral things that happen very much so outweigh and outshine some of the great good that these organizations can do, but it's about also holding them accountable, right? So accountability with advocacy allowed for me to create relationships with students and staff members and young adults that they were able to kind of put two and two together, right? Those aha moments clicked a little bit further along for them rather than like 10 or 15 years out of college. They're like, wow, we're in this space of learning and it's not just in the classroom. And so I prided myself on being able to provide an opportunity for students to learn while they were engaged and interacting with me. And that was something that I took personal. It was something that I took pride in. I still do, even though I'm not, right on campus and interacting with students day to day like I used to. It still provides me an opportunity to serve my community in a very authentic and heart-driven way, and I appreciate that. So being in that higher ed space definitely allowed for me to take risks on my career, right? To be able to dip and dabble into other professional positions and opportunities, and many times being thrown into things because other people see potential in me that I didn't see in myself. And so that really allowed for me to be kind of within that higher education and also association management experience, being the president, the first Black president of the Association of Fraternity and Sorority Advisors, and having that duty to serve my professional peers and to do so in a way that they're seen through me, right? I've never been in a position where it's about Veronica, Veronica, Veronica. It's about how can Veronica serve others while she's been in the position to do so. So I always see myself as a vessel of service, and the Creator allows for me to serve people in that way and to be utilized in the way that others need. And sometimes that's a painful process, right? Sometimes it's very uncomfortable, but there's no growth in the comfort zone. So I definitely appreciate that. Being in that area of higher education gave me experience where I was able to travel to different colleges and organizations and do strategic planning work and organizational development and planning work. Those opportunities actually are the ones that propelled me into this entrepreneurial world that I'm in right now, because people are like, you have your own like consulting business. And I was like, no, people are just coming to pay me to come and evaluate their programs, right? And give them advice on what to do better. And they're like, yeah, that thing called a 1099 that you get, right? And that W-9 that you're completing, you're a sole proprietor. You have a business outside of your professional work. So I saw it hand in hand. I saw it so intertwined into what it is that I was doing that I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's cool. And now that I had that knowledge at a very young professional age, I don't even think that I was 25 before I started to really be called to do some consulting work in organizational development and strategic planning. So I was very, very blessed and lucky to be at the right place at the right time. And so those opportunities kind of got my wheels going about what's possible, right? So if you're able to do this work in higher ed, and there's so many transferable skills, what else can you do, V? Now it's time to explore, right? So being able to have that silence period in my life awakened and being able to really overcome some of the tragedies around childhood bullying, because those traumas, they stick with you until you start to interrupt them very intentionally. And they did for me. So I had to unpack a lot of that. I had to unpack a lot of fear on why I was so afraid to go before crowds and public speak, because I was shamed, right? I was silenced. And so I didn't find my voice. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would be sitting on podcasts, sharing my story with other people, or just speaking, period, absolutely not. And when I tell people that even when I speak on a stage today, there's a moment, a very quick moment now, it's not as long as it used to be, that I am like, oh shit, I am so scared. What is about to happen? But now I know how to dig deep and find what's the story, V, what's the message? How do you want to impact people? I have questions that I'm able to lead myself with through my head to say, there's a reason why you're here. Find the reason, find the impact, deliver from the heart, and you'll be good to go. So, that was something that I really, it took me a long time to get through. Like, it took me a long, long time. I would say probably not until like 2020 that I started to like come out of that being afraid to public speak. And I still get the jitters, but I'm like, you have a message, other people need to hear this. And even the message of you being afraid to public speak, people need to hear that because there are others who feel the same way. Again, being that vessel where you're able to inspire other people to act. So, those entrepreneur spirits and being aware of what it is that I'm capable of, but also always eager to see what's next and being ambitious and taking risks. Why not open a restaurant, right? And so that was my husband's doing, though. He gets all the credit. That was definitely his faith leap. And I said, I'm going to support you throughout the entire thing. And we have been successful and struggled and triumphed, experienced triumph over and over again. Um, and it's hard work, right? It's hard work. And I think that I'm attracted to, to hard work. It's like it calls me because it's like, man, I want to be able to show people what's possible. And so, that burning desire to always overcome and always create as well. I found my space as a creator, and that feels good, especially when it comes to being a children's book author, right? So all of those things are tied together. So you start with a professional experience and exposure, and you have all of these other things that kind of come down the line of because you took that risk, you can experience these other things too.
I wanted to explore that a little bit more with you, Veronica, because throughout our conversation, there are some themes that are definitely emerging, and particularly the theme around community
Yeah.
and how when we are isolated, when we are targeted because we are the only or because of some aspect of our identity that makes us vulnerable to those bullies, how,
Mhm.
like you said, that it's not only traumatizing, but it can sometimes silence our wisdom and our voice and make us less able or willing to take risks. And it seems
Yeah.
as though that's something that you have worked really hard to overcome, but also the desire to advocate so that others don't have those same experiences, bringing kindness, bringing this advocacy for building community.
Yeah.
And also, I love what you were saying about just sort of like there's something very adventurous about not only wanting to learn as much as possible, but being willing to try new things, right? Being in that experimental stage rather than saying, oh, I'm going to fail, saying, this is going to be hard. Let's
Mhm.
just see what happens. And it sounds like many of those themes are also present in your work and particularly in the book that you published. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the book, about Rosie's special gift. And I particularly love the book title because my daughter's name is Rosie.
Oh,
And
perfect.
so that resonated with me. But tell us a little bit about what inspired the book and what are you hoping that readers get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter actually is the individual. She gets the credit for naming the book. Well, the character, at least, Rosie, is her doing, and that's her gift to me. But Rosie's special gift is really a story about kindness and empathy. It's a story about community building. It's a story about gentleness. And it really shows a mother-daughter relationship, how beautiful it can be when they are growing and learning together and experiencing things that happen through generational ties and generational practices that have been passed down. It is also a true story. So the inspiration from the book really comes from my relationship that I had with my late mother, who taught me everything that I needed to know about plant care and growing food. And I remember as a little girl, my mother would always say, being out in the yard is my therapy. As a young girl, I didn't know what that meant. As a teenager, I was like, what are you talking about? She loved being out there. She would be out there at the crack of dawn, like early in the morning, tending to the plants and really getting things done, and so that she could relax later on in the afternoon when it's hot. But Rosie's special gift is a tribute to my mother, right? It's an opportunity for me to download everything that she's taught me, the message of healing that even came through the book because she passed away unexpectedly as I was writing the book in 2023. But I know that she was guiding me for the other side to say, get it done, Veronica, because this book is not just for you. It is for other people to see the promise, the joy, the opportunity, and how powerful nature, growing food, and sharing that food with the community can be. Growing up, my mother always would have Ziploc bags ready for the neighbors, or when we would go over to family gatherings, she would have her tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers. She would have them all kind of separated in different goodie bags for other people to have. And so that was something that I wanted to share with other people, to say this powerful trade, this powerful hobby for some people, and this powerful occupation for others is truly remarkable and has the opportunity to bring communities together. It grows across generational lines. It has the power to really be able to get us to pause because we're so busy throughout the day. And when you're gardening and growing food and taking care of plants, you have to slow down. You absolutely have to slow down. You have to be mindful and meaningful in everything that you do because you want to see something to come from that, right? You want to reap a harvest of some sort, especially when you're gardening and growing food. Or if you're growing a plant, you want to be able to maybe clip a piece of that plant and propagate it into a new plant. So it's really an opportunity to share a powerful story about growth, not only from the actual act of growing plants and growing food, but also what happens within our souls when we do that and when we share that with other people. So that's kind of the glimpse into Rosie's special gift without giving you too much before you read it.
There are so many metaphors that we could unpack from that. And it always makes me think of the quote, and I don't remember where it originated, but there's a really inspirational sentence that I often think of. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And I
Mm,
think that's so powerful when we think about how, when we turn our mindset to one of possibility and growth, what is possible, when we see that opportunity, not just to survive individually, but to cultivate that sense of community so we can thrive.
yeah,
So anyway, just, that popped into my head as you were sharing a little bit about some of the underlying themes from the book.
absolutely. You're getting into the next book, so that's going to be
Oh, okay. Oh, can
you'll
you
be
give us a little
surprised to
sneak
hear the
peek?
story of that. Exactly what it is that you said, right? Being able to really understand how growing food can heal a generation and bring people together. So that is the next book that will be very hard to get through,
Mm,
but I will get through it because it is the tribute and kind of culminating experience of me honoring my mother and her influence, right, that she left on so many people. So it's going to be
yeah.
good. I'm excited about
Have you noticed that there's a real hunger for these types of messages? So you use the idea of plants and plant care to really, tap into your background and skills with student development and
it.
social emotional learning and all of that to really reach, I think, a place in people's hearts that really these messages and these types of stories resonate, right? And I think there's a real hunger in the world for folks to find outlets, or ways of thinking of therapy or of taking care of ourselves that remind us to slow down. And the work with plants definitely does so. And certainly with your Instagram page, Brown Skin Plant Mama, up to about 13,000 followers already and counting, there is a hunger for that, right? I think it's resonating with folks. So can you share a little bit about how you've noticed either your readers or folks that you've interacted with in some of this type of work, how they've responded and what kind of, you know, wonderful, I guess, and really inspiring moments you've seen as a result of these messages getting out there?
Yeah, it's an emotional tug for people. It's an indicator and it allows for them to time lapse back into those very uninterrupted moments that they also had with their grandparents, right? Or their ancestors. They have been able to really say, wow, that reminds me of my grandmother. And I haven't been in the yard in decades. Oh my goodness, I love plants too. And wow, what a beautiful thing to share that with your kids. And, I don't know how to grow anything, but your story has really inspired me to at least give it a try, right? Because I tell people everybody has the opportunity and what it takes to grow things. We just have to unlearn and relearn, right? What it takes to help something thrive and to really break down what nurturing something is, right? So that's been really wonderful to hear. And for me, it's been the joy and the amazing responses that I see on the children's faces when they read the story, when they hear the story, when they make the correlation that if they know me, they're like, wait, is Rosie Hunter? And is Rosie's mom you? And is Grandma D your mom? And I'm just like, yes, you all are putting it together. Right. And they get excited when I ask them that question, when I show them the page on the book and I say, this is kind of an example of a memory, right? Rosie's mom is flashing back and she's thinking back when she was a small girl. So if you see this page over here, who do you think this is? They're like, that's Rosie's grandma. And I'm like, that's absolutely right. So if this is Rosie's grandma, who is this? They're like, Rosie's mom. Oh my goodness, look, it's Rosie's mom. So they get so excited. And that brings me joy because I'm like, they are connecting to the story, right? They are connecting to the meaning behind the story, not just what the illustration looks like. Not just because there's a pretty plant on the picture being illustrated, right? And my illustrator was absolutely amazing. She captured everything I wanted her to in this book. But being able to help students visualize and realize that they see themselves in stories, right? It was very, very intentional for me to put a beautiful Black brown girl on the cover of that book. It was absolutely intentional because we continue to see book bans happening, right? We continue to see the suffocation of literacy for children, especially underserved children, and especially children within the BIPOC community. We continue to see those things taken away. And we're reverting back, right, to the segregation era of like, why are you so concerned about these messages in children's books? Right? What are you threatened by? So it really gives me joy as a disruptor, you know this, to be very true, Roger. I am a disruptor by nature. So if I have an opportunity to really empower, disrupt, and also advocate, I'm going to do that. This book has allowed for me to do that. It's allowed for me to enter very unfamiliar spaces in terms of being an author and a writer. And even saying that now, I'm just like, that's kind of weird. But I guess I'm kind of going into that uncharted territory too, taking the risk of what that looks like, being ambitious. So that's the message behind the book. Those are the things that I love to see people encounter and realize. And then it positions me to continue my very strong passion to advocate on behalf of others.
Well, I know that our disrupting bonded us even more. So I'm grateful for that. And I certainly see that in the work that you're doing now. And the thought I had as you were saying that um, was, to kind of think about if you were to give a message and if, let's say, some of those young, just about to enter college or already now currently in college students who are Black and brown folks who are, maybe having similar challenges or maybe have had, experiences of maybe not believing in their skills or ability or not seeing enough role models or not, receiving enough positive affirmation. What
Yeah,
message would you give to folks listening about what they can do and what your example has shown for them?
that's a great question. What would I tell V, young V? I would tell young V to find your people. Find your people, find the people that are going to push you outside of your comfort zone because I had so many people just stroking my level of just being comfortable and complacent as a young adult. And that got me to a place of almost being stagnant. I didn't appreciate that. And I struggled with my development later on. And I would say probably longer than I needed to, right? If I had the right people around me ready to push me, and my peers, we need to be able to find that in our peers in addition to those who are our elders, right? Because it's important for us to understand and know that the generation that you are a part of, that you are currently in, that's your trajectory, right? That's going to give you a glimpse into what's possible, what's next. So we have to be able to find your people, find your community. And then we have to find, and this is very intentional, and it may be agitating, but you have to find the opportunities to disrupt. Because if you don't, then things will remain as they are. And that is what has many places and people and society stuck, right? Stuck in old ways, stuck in old mentality, stuck from moving forward because we're just so used to what it is right now that we're not willing to disrupt thought, that we're not willing to disrupt policy, we're not willing to disrupt the things that we've been told that we can't do. We've taken that as face value and said, okay. And so I would encourage folks to say, I don't think so. I think that we need to be doing X, Y, and Z, right? And so in order to find opportunities to disrupt, you also have to find those individuals who are going to be your allies, right? Who are going to push you along. And those likely will be those who are adults, older than you, who have the knowledge and experience. And they have pretty much what I would say when I was an administrator on campus is I don't have anything to lose. Many people think that they do, but I'm not doing my job if I do have something to lose. I'm willing to push for you because I have to show you the example of what it looks like appropriately, right, and safely to do that. And so you have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there, and they have to pay attention enough to see what are happening with the inequities around you, and who are you seeing at points of disruption during those inequitable moments that people are speaking out against. Yeah, just continue to disrupt, continue to be those advocates, and continue to speak loud and proud.
One of the things that strikes me in this conversation too, Veronica, is the intersection across all of these different interests and how you've brought them together. And you know, I often think about, for example, just gardening, working with plants as being sort of this hobby, right? It's something that we do to kind of unwind or distract ourselves, or maybe it's a chore that we have to do.
Mhm.
But I love the way that you center it in this. It is a part of advocacy, right? It is a part of disruption, the practice of disruption, and you know that notion of slowing down and focusing, centering our mental wellness in
Yeah.
order to be able to keep up the momentum, and push to change the status quo, because that can't happen overnight. And all of us, I think, to Roger's point earlier, are feeling so worn down because
Yeah.
sometimes just the nature of the work that we do as disruptors can feel very overwhelming and
Mhm.
taxing. So can you talk a little bit about, just kind of, mm, practically, right? Practically speaking, how do you meld all of these things together? What sort of advice do you have for people who want to be active disruptors and also maybe are, like many of us, losing sight sometimes of our mental wellness?
I think you can only disrupt if you are, and there's no perfect, right, formula for this, right? There's no get to this point first and then. But I do think that it is very important to have a priority of personal wellness, and well-being, mental, emotional, spiritually, so that you can be prepared to disrupt when it's necessary. If you are broken, shattered, torn down, and cannot function, you are not presenting your whole self to be able to disrupt. And the act of disrupting takes a lot of energy. So my husband and I sit on a community action development board. So community actions committees are across the United States, right? And they're politically inspired organizations that really focus on the well-being of the community. And I always think about how I feel when I leave that meeting. And it's because we're talking about meaningful things. We're doing great work. We want to be intentional about how we're serving the community, but I leave tense because I've brought everything that I can to that conversation about disrupting what's currently in place. And now I'm depleted a little bit, right? And so it's important to realize and be able to be cognizant of what you're feeling in those moments of disrupting when you're done. That, okay, so now what do I need to do to refuel? Because the work is not done. It's never going to be done as a disruptor. There's always going to be something brought our way. And it's also very important to recognize when you cannot serve. I'm sorry, I just don't have the capacity for that, right? But it's really important to center your personal wellness first and foremost so that you have the capacity to serve and whatever that personal wellness practice is for you. For me, it's gardening and, taking care of my house plants and also doing things with my family, right? For other people, it may be physical activities, right? For other people, it may be writing and creating and illustrating, whatever that wellness practice is, because we do have to think about the things that we spend our time doing and what we like to do. There's a wellness component to everything, every hobby, right? Every interest. So being able to really prioritize that first and foremost so that you can go and serve is the advice that I would give to folks. And, sometimes you may need to enlist the help of other people. So if you need to go to therapy, whatever that looks like for you, to get some of that stuff downloaded out of your system and kind of like filtrate it down the networks a different way, then go and do that so that you can then come back to that wellness practice whole, and then you can go to the disruptor space ready to serve. So that's the advice that I would give. That's what kind of centers me and reminds me of the work and why it's important and how it's interconnected. There's a lot of justice that happens even from the community model, the community health model, in terms of how growing food and gardening is a part of that space too. So it's like, how are all these things intertwined and how can we find our place within these moments of advocacy?
I'm inspired. And I'm actually thinking, how obviously with what's happening on campuses nowadays too, and especially what we've seen in recent weeks, there is a hunger for folks to find that inner disruptor that is inside so many of us, right? And I think that when folks reach a point of disruption, it is typically folks telling us what their deepest, most important core values are, not just for themselves, but for the larger communities that they're a part of. And if we can continue to feed that, we can inspire folks to continue to disrupt in ways that are really pushing and nudging and cajoling our society and inching us more and more closely to the equitable world that we all imagine, right? And it sometimes takes, provoking to make that happen and to believe in yourself to do that, much like we provoke our gardens to grow by intentional disruptive efforts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Veronica, this has been such a wonderful conversation and I'm inspired equally. So I'm going to, and it's beautiful weather here in Washington, D.C. So I might have to go out and do some gardening, get my hands
or just
in the ground.
Soil and dirt and get out and feel the sun.
Yes.
Try to do that and not breathe too deeply to get the pollens
right
all over our cars right now.
So for people who are interested in learning a little bit more about you and the work that you do, how can they find you, Veronica?
Sure. You can find me on all social media channels except for X. I am not on X. Brown Skin Plant Mama. You can also find me on my website is veronicahmore.com. That has all of my plant therapy education information. You can access my book that way also. And author Veronica H. Moore at gmail.com if you want to spark a conversation outside of, the social media channels. We can do that as well. But I look forward to engaging with all of you all who are listening and watching. And I thank you too so much, Roger and Maria, for allowing me to be a guest on this amazing platform you've built.
Thank you, Veronica Moore. It's been such an honor to have you, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Absolutely.
Veronica, and also for folks that love barbecue and brisket, Taste Smokers, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Yes, absolutely. How could I forget? The Taste Smokers is located in the Lehigh Valley, specifically Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We are a mobile barbecue pit and an event space located at 318 East 3rd Street. You can find information about us at www.thetastesmokers.com.
Thank you for listening to Culture Stew. In a world full of podcasts, we are so grateful that you chose to spend time with us today.
Culture Stew is produced by MSM Global Consulting and hosted by me, Maria Morukian.
And me, Roger Moreano.
Are you interested in learning more about Culture Stew and MSM Global Consulting? Sign up for the Culture Stew newsletter at www.msmglobalconsulting.com and send us your stories or your questions at culturestew@msmglobalconsulting.com.
And remember to please give us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast platform.
See you next time.